Chapter 545. February 12, 2017's Valentine's Day was still 2 days away. Valentine's Day originated from the West. The people of Xinjiang who had experienced the colonial era also regarded Valentine's Day as an important festival, especially for many young men and women. This day was even more important than the Spring Festival. Sending flowers and chocolates, dating for dinner and a movie, then hanging out in a bar until late at night, and finally getting a room in a hotel to be romantic until the early morning had become the standard routine for many people to celebrate Valentine's Day. Of course, the consumption power brought by this was incomparably strong. Big and small cinemas in Xinjiang were often prepared in advance to welcome a full flow of customers. Therefore, Valentine's Day was undoubtedly the hot peak period of the new year. Many powerful and ambitious new films often chose to be released at this time to push up their first day and first week box office. On February 14, it was estimated that there would be 7 new films released in 129 cinemas in Xinjiang. Plus the films released before and after the new year, the competition was extremely fierce. Everyone was staring at this fat cake. Without the strong competition from Hollywood blockbusters, The Painted Skin was undoubtedly the one that attracted the most attention out of the 7 new films. The stills and trailers that were released in the early stages were also recognized by film critics and many audiences. Coupled with the indiscriminate bombardment of media advertisements, it brought about a high level of anticipation in the market. Rewrite the story of Strange Stories from a Chinese studio, create a first-class Chinese fantasy blockbuster, and conquer the audience with the best special effects. This was the advertising slogan of The Painted Skin. On the evening of February 12, Huaguan Pictures and Star Art Entertainment held a grand world premiere of The Painted Skin at the Oriental Hollywood Theater. The predecessor of the Oriental Hollywood Theater was Dongzhou Cinema. It was one of the earliest cinemas in Xinjiang. Its history could be traced back to the beginning of the last century. It had a history of more than 100 years, and it could be said to be a household name in Xinjiang. Located in the prime area of Central, the Oriental Hollywood Theater had been renovated and expanded 3 times. Now it was also the largest cinema in Xinjiang, with 19 independent broadcast halls, including a hall that could accommodate thousands of audiences. Because of its seniority, high reputation, and large scale, Xinjiang and even some Hollywood blockbusters chose the Oriental Hollywood Theater as the venue for the premiere. Huaguan Pictures held the premiere of The Painted Skin in the Oriental Hollywood Theater, undoubtedly showing its ambition. Just after 7 p.m., the small open-air square in front of the Oriental Hollywood Theater was already surrounded by a large number of media reporters and onlookers. Of course, there were many celebrity fans holding up placards. A long red carpet was laid from the street in front of the square to the entrance of the theater. There was a signature wall, a flower arch, and a media interview area. People who didn't know better would think that there was a grand prize ceremony being held here. However, the number of celebrities that appeared on the red carpet tonight was incomparable to some award ceremonies. This could be seen from the cheers of the fans in the stadium and the flashes of the cameras. Annie, Zhang Meiyun, Gu Qing. The owners of these names were all the new generation figures in Xinjiang's entertainment circle. One of the advertising points of Painted Skin was youth idols. The movie gathered a large number of popular new artists. The men were handsome, and the women were beautiful. They had also released the news on their respective blogs early, so a large number of fans came to the scene to support them, making the atmosphere of the premiere very lively. As for the media, needless to say, Huaguan Pictures has already spent millions of yuan on publicity in Hong Kong, and all the newspapers, magazines, and websites that share in the profits have all sent their elites to help. Jiang Wei. At 7:39, the male lead of Painted Skin, Jiang Wei, finally appeared on the stage. This popular young man of Star Art Entertainment seemed to be completely unaffected by the recent scandals. He wore a white suit and got out of the Mercedes-Benz. He was in high spirits and had a smile on his face, which immediately attracted a lot of attention. Jiang Wei. Jiang Wei. A group of female fans suddenly became excited. They held up their support sticks, signs, and gifts. They shouted Jiang Wei's name and rushed towards him in the crowd. The security staff at the scene saw that the situation was not good, so they immediately formed a human wall to stop these crazy fans from crossing the line. Jiang Weiji waved at them with satisfaction, then stepped on the red carpet with his head held high, and walked to the autograph table accompanied by flashes. After signing his name, he walked to the media interview area to be interviewed by the reporters. In fact, under normal circumstances, the lead and main cast of a movie would only be interviewed by the media after the premiere. Huaguan Pictures broke the convention by making the premiere into an award ceremony, which could be considered unique. Or rather, sensationalism. Mr. Jiang Wei, can you talk about this movie? More than a dozen microphones and recording pens with media logos were placed in front of Jiang Wei. One of the reporters couldn't wait to ask, "How much box office do you think Painted Skin will get?" Jiang Wei said confidently, "Painted Skin is a good movie, and it's also an exciting movie that's worth the audience spending money to watch. Its special effects don't lose out to Hollywood blockbusters at all. As for the specifics of the story, please go to the theater and watch it yourself. I won't spoil it here. As for the box office," he paused, then continued, "I predict that it should have a box office of more than 30 million in Hong Kong. It is not impossible for it to exceed 50 million, because the quality of Painted Skin is good enough." Although most of these media reporters were specially invited and would not deliberately make things difficult for him, Jiang Wei still left some leeway in his answer, which was considered more cautious. Although the film market in Hong Kong could not be compared to that in China, it still had a scale of 3 to 4 billion. With the investment and publicity costs of Painted Skin, it was very possible to achieve a box office of 30 to 50 million in Hong Kong. After all, this period of time was the craze for watching movies, and there would be a wave of aftershocks after the festival. Another reporter asked, "As far as I know, a Chinese ghost story, which is in the same genre as Painted Skin, will premiere on the 18th. What do you think of this movie?" The corners of Jiang Wei's lips curled up as if he was silently looking down on them. He smiled and said, "I don't pay much attention to the movie you mentioned, so I can't say I have any opinion on it. But I believe that with the strength of a Painted Skin, it is enough to defeat any opponent." His last few words were said in a heroic manner, but also filled with an overbearing sense of aggressiveness. Jiang Wei's incomparably confident look made the reporter's eyes light up. The clicking sound of camera shutters was endless, accompanied by a continuous stream of questions. "Mr. Jiang Wei, can you talk about the scandal between you and Miss Wu Mengzhen? May I ask if you really..." Chapter 546. The Painted Skin premieres to rave reviews. It officially hits all major cinemas in Hong Kong on Valentine's Day. Many celebrities are here to cheer for the premiere of Painted Skin. Creating a Hong Kong fantasy masterpiece, the Painted Skin's first-class special effects are comparable to Hollywood blockbusters. Jiang Wei Hao says the Painted Skin's Hong Kong box office is 50 million. Thoughts on the premiere of The Painted Skin? On the second day after the premiere of The Painted Skin, the entertainment section of all the major media and websites in Xiangjiang was flooded by this new film. Those celebrities who participated in the premiere published blog posts one after another, praising how wonderful the story of The Painted Skin was and how outstanding the special effects were. Many Xiangjiang film critics strongly recommended The Painted Skin on newspapers and blogs, believing that it was a rarely seen masterpiece of supernatural and fantasy in the past few years. It was a masterpiece that was worth spending 30 yuan to enter the cinema to watch. Their reviews and the praises from the media had created a lot of hype for the upcoming Painted Skin, and the effect was undoubtedly very good. All the major cinemas had basically booked all the tickets for Painted Skin on Valentine's Day. Even the tickets for the 15th and 16th were more than half booked. This was the power of advertising. Before a new film was released, the audience was easily influenced by the media. To a large extent, the media's advertising determined the direction of consumption. Of course, a film's reputation was not built by critics and advertisements. Whether The Painted Skin would be a huge success in the box office depended on the audience's evaluation. But before that, The Painted Skin was unparalleled in the Hong Kong film market. It could be said that it was the most coquettish film. Aren't you worried at all? On the Red Rose pedestrian street in Xiangjiang Central, in the midst of the bustling crowd, Chen Fei curiously asked Lu Chen, who was holding her hand. In a few days, our movie will premiere. Today was Valentine's Day. The pedestrian street in the bustling business district of Central was very lively. The flower beds on both sides of the street were full of blooming flowers. There were even government volunteers giving roses to couples passing by. The shops along the street had already put up posters to celebrate the festival. Even the air was filled with the smell of romance. Chen Fei flew to Xiangjiang last night. Valentine's Day was such an important holiday. She definitely had to be with Lu Chen and would stay in Xiangjiang until the premiere of a Chinese ghost story. For this reason, she deliberately turned down a lot of work and program invitations. Tonight, the two of them had a heartwarming dinner together. After dinner, they went out to go shopping. Hand in hand, they mingled with pairs of couples. It was also a very happy thing. Most importantly, this was the second Valentine's Day that Chen Fei and Lu Chen had spent together. But Chen Fei was not the kind of girl who regarded romantic love as her life. Today was the premiere day of The Painted Skin. As the strongest competitor of a Chinese ghost story, the movie's promotional campaign had been so intense a few days ago that even she, who was far away in the capital, could smell the smoke of gunpowder. In contrast, the publicity for a Chinese ghost story had always been tepid and maintained its original rhythm. This inevitably made Chen Fei feel a little worried. Most of the time, the two competitors were one step ahead and one step ahead. At least for now, The Painted Skin, which had the advantage of being the first, had left a Chinese ghost story far behind. Whether The Painted Skin, which was about to premiere in a few days, could catch up with its opponent's footsteps naturally became her concern. Lu Chen smiled and said, "I'm not worried because I know it's useless to worry. Besides, today is Valentine's Day. Are you really going to talk to me about work?" Chen Fei rolled her eyes at him. "I'm just concerned about you." Although the success or failure of a movie did not have much of an impact on Lu Chen financially, even if he lost all the tens of millions of yuan he had invested, it would not be to the extent of hurting him. However, a Chinese ghost story was Lu Chen's first movie, and it was also competing with The Painted Skin. If it failed miserably at the box office or even did not get support, it would be a big blow to his reputation and career. Some people in the industry said that Lu Chen was too egotistical. Singing did not mean that he could act in TV, and acting in TV did not prove his strength in movies. It was not easy to walk the road of being a triple star. If a Chinese ghost story failed, it would undoubtedly give these people a reason to ridicule him. Not to mention Huaguan Pictures, who was now like a mortal enemy, who knew how they would laugh at him. Lu Chen held her hand and said, "I know you treat me the best." Although their relationship had reached the most intimate level, at this moment, Lu Chen's gentleness still made Chen Fei feel shy and sweet. The two of them stood on the street hand in hand. There was an endless stream of people coming and going, but it was as if the whole world only existed for the two of them. Everything else was just the background. "Sir, your girlfriend is so beautiful. Why don't you buy her a bouquet of roses?" At this moment, a little girl carrying a flower basket stumbled over and tried to sell her rose bouquet to Lu Chen. How can one be enough? There were roses everywhere on the Red Rose pedestrian street, and there were also free roses. Therefore, the little girl's business was quite bad. There were more than a dozen bouquets in the basket, but no one was interested. Chen Fei had a free rose in her hand. However, the little girl did not give up. She blinked her big watery eyes and looked at Lu Chen pitifully. This kind of trick was often useless to couples who were used to seeing little girls selling flowers. Lu Chen was not a fool, but he still asked, "How much is a bouquet?" The little girl quickly said, 100 yuan. "There are 12 flowers in a bouquet. They were just picked this morning. They are very fresh." Lu Chen counted the bouquets in her basket, took out the money and said, "I want all 11 bouquets of flowers here." The little girl was overjoyed. She bowed and said, "Thank you, sir, thank you." She directly gave the roses and the basket to Lu Chen, and then happily disappeared into the crowd. Lu Chen carried a basket of roses and said to Chen Fei, with a smile, I don't remember giving you many roses. I'll make it up to you today. Since the two of them had been dating, Lu Chen had not given many roses to Chen Fei. Chen Fei glanced at him coquettishly and said, "You just realized." Although she said that, she still happily took a large bouquet of roses from Lu Chen's hand. Chen Fei lowered her head and sniffed, then asked, "Where are we going next?" Lu Chen showed 2 movie tickets as if he was performing a magic trick. "To see a movie, of course." "Ah." Chen Fei whispered, "What movie?" Lu Chen smiled and said, "Painted Skin." Chapter 547. From east to west, at the end of the central Red Rose pedestrian street was the Rose Theater. Among the hundreds of large and small cinemas in Xiangjiang, the Rose Theater was definitely not the largest and had the most advanced facilities. In fact, it only had 5 independent projection halls and did not have a 3D giant screen. It was not on the same level as the Oriental Hollywood Theater that was not far away. But in terms of popularity, the Rose Theater was no less than the Hollywood Theater, and in terms of popularity among couples, the former was even more popular than the latter. This was because all the seats in the Rose Theater were double seats, which were lovers' seats. They were spacious, comfortable, and extremely private. Other than Hollywood blockbusters, the movies played all year round were mainly romantic comedies, so it was deeply loved by couples. On Valentine's Day, the theater also gave out extra gifts such as chocolate, popcorn, and so on, so the tickets for the 5 screening halls had been booked early. Chen Wenxiang had gotten Lu Chen's tickets through his connections, otherwise he would not have been able to buy them now. The tickets were VIP tickets, and the seats were VIP boxes with better privacy. The movie started at 8:10. When Lu Chen brought Chen Fei over, it was already close to 8. He glanced at the screen in the hall outside and found that the screening for the Painted Skin had reached at least 35%. This was very impressive. Usually, other than Hollywood blockbusters, when Hong Kong films or Sino-Hong Kong co-productions were first released, the screening rate was between 10% and 30%, and then adjusted according to the subsequent market response. 35% at the beginning was basically the treatment of Hollywood blockbusters. Considering that there were many new films being released today, the producers of The Painted Skin, Huaguan Pictures, and Star Art Entertainment, had definitely spent a lot of effort on public relations in the cinemas, in order to make it a hit. This undoubtedly brought considerable pressure to their competitors. For example, Lu Chen's A Chinese Ghost Story, after many efforts and coordination by Jiayang Pictures, was only 20% of the screening in several major cinemas on the 21st, and it was not completely guaranteed. This was because the market situation was ever-changing, just like the weather. Although it could be predicted in advance, it could change at any time. A Chinese Ghost Story, which was released after The Painted Skin, was bound to face the pressure of the former. Coupled with the box office sales of The Painted Skin, the cinema chains increased their production rate. Other films in the same period, including A Chinese Ghost Story, would definitely have to make way. They couldn't possibly hinder the cinema from making money, right? That was why Lu Chen had brought Chen Fei over today. He did not neglect romance and work. He did not place too much importance on the success or failure of A Chinese Ghost Story, but he would not be indifferent to his competitors. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Lu Chen and Chen Fei sat down in a private room. The theater attendant left after serving them coffee, drinks, and small gifts, leaving the two of them some privacy. Before leaving, the waiter looked at Lu Chen curiously. She felt that this tall and handsome guy was a little familiar. He seemed to be a star, but there were also stars who came to the Rose Cinema to watch movies, so she didn't pay much attention to him. Chen Fei leaned against Lu Chen's chest and giggled. Does this count as going deep into the enemy's rear to observe them? Lu Chen couldn't help but laugh. How can it be so exaggerated? After a pause, he continued, in fact, as far as I'm concerned, I still hope that both China and Hong Kong can make more good movies and regain the market we've lost. Since entering the new century, the domestic film market had continued to be popular, and the box office had been rising steadily. It was already the second largest source of box office in the world, second only to the United States, and it was expected to surpass it in the next 5 years. However, more than 50% of such a large market share was occupied by imported films, especially Hollywood blockbusters. Moreover, the latter accounted for more than 90% of movie-related peripheral products. Many Hollywood movies relied on the sales of peripheral products to achieve a net box office profit of more than 200%. In contrast, domestic films were pitifully weak in this regard. This made many knowledgeable people in the domestic film industry cry out loudly. Revitalizing domestic films and improving the added value of movie peripheral products had become the mission and responsibility of the new generation of young filmmakers. In this regard, Lu Chen, who had just entered the film industry, had also tried it. A batch of figurines, posters, props, accessories, toys, and so on for A Chinese Ghost Story had been produced in Xinjiang and would be sold in cinemas on the day of the release. When he came in just now, Lu Chen deliberately bypassed the sales area of the movie peripheral products in the hall and found that there were basically no peripherals for The Painted Skin on sale except for the posters. Although Hollywood blockbusters had an absolute advantage in this regard, local film companies could not get used to this advantage and put themselves in the position of bystanders. They were worried that they would lose money and do nothing. On the other hand, this was also a manifestation of lack of confidence in the film itself. Lu Chen's words were not to show how high his moral integrity was in front of Chen Fei, but from the bottom of his heart. The more he integrated into the film industry, the more he felt. Chen Fei held his hand, and her bright eyes flashed. What she likes is precisely this kind of Lu Chen. The atmosphere in the private room quietly became warm and sweet, and then the movie began. Chen Fei adjusted her sitting posture and leaned comfortably into Lu Chen's arms. Lu Chen hugged her waist, and the two began to quietly enjoy The Painted Skin, produced by Huaguan Pictures and Star Art Entertainment. After the 110-minute movie, it was already 10 p.m. Chen Fei stretched and yawned cutely, looking a little sleepy. She turned her head and kissed Lu Chen's face, saying, "It's over. Let's go back." Lu Chen nodded and asked, "How do you feel?" Chen Fei, hee. Perhaps she felt that such a response was too simple, so she added, "The special effects are not bad." The special effects are not bad. Lu Chen completely agreed with this evaluation. It was worthy of being the most powerful special effects production company in Hong Kong. Although its level could not be compared with the top Hollywood peers, at least it had first-class quality. As a fantasy blockbuster, Lu Chen gave The Painted Skin 8 points in terms of the performance of the special effects alone. The full score was 10 points. He stood up and said, "Let's go and find a place to have a drink." Today was Valentine's Day, and tonight was a romantic night. It was enough to spend 2 precious hours here. What followed should be a sweet time for the two. Chapter 548. On February 14th, Painted Skin was officially released in all major cinemas in Xinjiang, with 37.5% screening. The box office on the first day was 7.5 million. With such a result, it was undoubtedly the box office champion of the day, and created the best box office result for a domestic film in Hong Kong in the past 13 months. Such a bright first-day box office also boosted the confidence of Huaguan Pictures and Star Art Entertainment. They increased the number of advertisements in major media, and the publicity campaign was vigorous. The media who got the benefits naturally praised the film, saying that it was the first fantasy film produced by China and Hong Kong, that it surpassed Hollywood, and that it opened up a new genre of ghost films. The actors who participated in Painted Skin all posted celebratory blog posts, and the male lead, Jiang Wei, proudly said on his blog that he had underestimated the box office results of Painted Skin. The 50 million Hong Kong box office was not the end, but the beginning. And on another important promotional front, Hong Kong blogs and forums, there were also a large number of blog posts and posts praising Painted Skin, most of which were comments from the so-called ordinary audience. The plot is wonderful, the special effects are outstanding, it's worth spending money to support it. I didn't expect our Xinjiang to make such a wonderful special effects blockbuster, I have to give it a like. I went with my girlfriend yesterday, and the box office I booked a few days ago was worth it. I also went with my girlfriend, and she said it was very good and wanted to watch it again. Wonderful, really wonderful. There were so many praises on the blogs and forums that people felt it was their loss not to watch it. Coupled with the lucky draw launched by the official V, the momentum on the internet was no less than in reality. But unlike newspapers and magazines where readers could only passively accept, in the infinite and free world of the internet, not everyone could be bought over or fooled. Voices of opposition appeared much faster than expected. I watched Painted Skin yesterday. I can only say that the 35 yuan was thrown into the water. The special effects of Painted Skin are really good, but the plot is terrible, and the story logic is messed up. Terrible. I'm not exaggerating. I left with my girlfriend halfway through. It was not interesting. Painted Skin is really not that good. It's not as good as the media made it out to be. It's only the special effects that pass. I said I was very disappointed after watching it. Is this the Ghost and Ghost film that they invested 100 to 200 million yuan in? The story is so melodramatic. The voices of opposition first appeared on the Hong Kong forum. The film and television section was one of the most active sections of the Hong Kong forum. There were hundreds of thousands of active registered members. Different from those marketing film critics who sold articles for a living, Wang Dong never took money from public relations companies when he wrote film reviews. Therefore, his film reviews were relatively more fair and just, and thus he had a high influence among many Xiangjiang audiences. Especially many Xiangjiang people in their 30s and 40s, they liked to read his film review articles. Of course, Wang Dong's film reviews were not perfect. He was more inclined towards artistic films rather than commercial films. Therefore, he often criticized those popcorn movies that sold well at the box office. As for the so-called sh*t, 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 and Laughing Family Happy movies produced in Hong Kong, they were criticized by Wang Dong to be worthless. This also caused him to become a figure that was not very popular in Hong Kong's film industry. But even if he was hated and despised by others, Wang Dong never changed his film review style. The producers of those praised movies would be complacent because of the free good reviews, but the producers of The Painted Skin, Huaguan Pictures, and Star Art Entertainment would definitely be very unhappy. The first to open fire was the male lead of The Painted Skin, Jiang Wei. He directly scolded Wang Dong's film review on his blog, saying that he took someone else's money to slander The Painted Skin. His words were very fierce. Although Jiang Wei quickly deleted his blog post, his criticism of Wang Dong still caused an uproar on the internet, and also made The Painted Skin a hot topic on Hong Kong's blogs. Chapter 549. On February 15th, the box office for Painted Skin was 8.6 million, up 900,000 from the previous day. Because on the 15th, all the major cinemas increased the number of screenings for Painted Skin, and the tickets for the next few days were basically booked out, the box office results were not affected by the negative comments online. It continued to lead the Hong Kong box office. On February 16th, the box office was 8.35 million, down slightly from the previous day. From the 14th to the 16th, the total box office for Painted Skin was 24.45 million. The results were extremely dazzling. It was said that HGC and Star Art Entertainment were already preparing for a celebration. But on the internet, the number of negative comments for Painted Skin suddenly skyrocketed. Many viewers who watched the film out of admiration began to complain on blogs and forums, saying that they were cheated or that the ticket price was not worth it. Although HGC and Star Art Entertainment increased their marketing efforts, they still could not suppress the voices of opposition. The plot was chaotic, the story was cliché, the actors were clumsy, except for the special effects, everything else was simply unsightly. Some people joked that watching the trailer for Painted Skin was enough, and that there was no need to spend money, because the trailer concentrated the best parts of the special effects. On February 17th, the box office for Painted Skin suddenly dropped to 4.27 million, a drop of nearly 50%. The bloody reality was like a heavy slap in the face, forcefully slapping HGC and Star Art Entertainment in the face. It made the official blogs of both sides lose their voices, and the articles that were advocating for the film became a joke. On the 17th, the screening rate for Painted Skin reached 47.68%, the highest in a few days. But the box office dropped so fiercely, and there was only one reason. There was a problem with the film itself. A few days ago, with the help of Valentine's Day, coupled with the strong promotion of the film's producers, Painted Skin had an astonishing number of reserved tickets, and it seemed that the situation was indeed good. But the audience saw with their own eyes. They might be deceived by the promotion for a while, but they would not be fooled forever, and the power of word of mouth was infinite. Painted Skin's reputation was terrible, really terrible. On the 17th and 18th, there were a large number of ticket refunds, so it was reasonable that the box office would fall precipitously. After being slapped in the face, Huaguan Film and Star Art Entertainment did not seriously reflect on the reasons behind it. The higher-ups believed that the unfavorable public opinion on the internet was the root of the problem. Therefore, not only did they not adjust their publicity strategy, but they also increased their investment in the media. Jiang Wei and a group of main actors also did their best to wave flags and shout for the film on different occasions. Actually, they had no other way out. If the box office fell too fast and too hard, then the cinemas would first have to reduce the number of screenings, and the reduced number of screenings would in turn suppress the box office. Such a vicious cycle was an outcome that Huaguan Films and Star Art Entertainment did not want to see. Even if they had to throw in a lot of money, they had to rebuild the reputation of Painted Skin. This was because it would affect the domestic screening, and that was where the box office was most important. At this time, HGC Films and Star Art Entertainment, who were a little overwhelmed, had forgotten one thing. A Chinese Ghost Story was about to be released. At 8 p.m. on February 18th, A Chinese Ghost Story held its premiere at the Triumph Theatre. Unlike Painted Skin, which was as grand as an awards ceremony at the Oriental Hollywood Theatre, the premiere of A Chinese Ghost Story was quite low-key and simple. There was no noise of gongs and drums, and there was no ceremony for celebrities and actors to walk the red carpet. There were not even many media reporters invited. It gave people the feeling that Luchan Studio and Jiayang Pictures had made a movie together, and then invited their relatives and friends to come and watch it together and give them some opinions. It was so low-key that it was a little unseemly. However, although it was low-key, there were many entertainment reporters who rushed to the entrance of the Triumph Theatre that night. This was because the official Weibo of A Chinese Ghost Story had already released the news in advance. In addition to the main actors of the film, members of the Xiangjiang Film Association, and media reporters, the guests attending the premiere also included many celebrity artists in the Xiangjiang entertainment industry. Among them was Lu Gangsheng. Most of the entertainment media were willing to send people to take a few photos just for this superstar. What's more, the stars of A Chinese Ghost Story, Lu Chen and Chen Fei, were now well-known mainland artists in Xiangjiang. Autumn in My Heart, which was being broadcast on Xiangjiang satellite TV, made Lu Chen and Chen Fei's popularity in Hong Kong rise steadily. Not only was this TV series deeply loved by those housewives, but it also had a great influence among the young people in Xiangjiang. The number of fans of the two was already comparable to that of the A-list stars in Xiangjiang. In addition, there was Nie Mingzhu, the female lead of A Chinese Ghost Story. Because of the stills, she became popular before the movie was released. However, her background was very mysterious, so there was naturally no lack of paparazzi to investigate. Because of this, a large number of reporters and fans had gathered in front of the Triumph Theatre just after 7 o'clock. There were also many pedestrians and tourists who did not know the truth. Some fans held up paper cards with the words, "High price for tickets," and looked at the passers-by with anticipation. At the premiere of A Chinese Ghost Story, 150 of the tickets were given out by the official V in the form of a lucky draw. These fans wanted this kind of ticket. There were also some real fans who wanted to see their idols up close. Such a large number of people appearing at the entrance of the theater inevitably brought about a little chaos. Fortunately, the theater had already arranged security personnel to maintain order at the scene. The Triumph Theater was also an old big theater. It was located in the bustling area of Causeway Bay, very close to Victoria Park. Its scale and strength were second only to the Oriental Hollywood Theatre. Whether it was a Hollywood blockbuster, a mainland film, or a local Hong Kong film, if the premiere was in Xiangjiang, then the premiere would not be held at the Oriental Hollywood Theatre, but at the Triumph Theatre. Lu Chen and the main cast of A Chinese Ghost Story were the first to arrive at the theatre. After getting out of the car, he and Chen Fei were immediately surrounded by reporters. The flashes were all over the place, and the clicking of shutters was endless, mixed with the shouts of fans. As there was no red carpet ceremony, Lu Chen quickly pulled Chen Fei through the safety passage formed by the security personnel and entered the theater. He did not accept any interviews from the reporters. The other crew members followed closely. Director Wan Xiaoquan was a little speechless. Why are there so many people? Chen Wenxiang, who was walking with him, smiled and said, "This is a good thing. It means that we are getting a lot of attention, Lu Gangsheng." Before he could finish speaking, a tsunami of shouts came from outside the theater behind him. Chapter 550. Lu Gangsheng was here. In fact, Lu Chen did not expect to be able to invite the King of Hong Kong. After all, the other party was not an ordinary person. His usual work schedule must be full, and it was not easy to meet him. It was only out of courtesy that he sent someone to deliver an invitation letter over. In the end, to Lu Chen's surprise, Lu Gangsheng actually said that he would personally attend the premiere of A Chinese Ghost Story, and even posted a message on his blog. Lu Gangsheng had the highest number of fans on Hong Kong blogs. Among all the artists in the entertainment industry, he was also the most influential. Therefore, many fans came to meet their idol in advance tonight. Lu Gangsheng must have known this, so he did not take the VIP entrance of the underground parking lot of the Triumph Theatre. Instead, he walked through the front like everyone else so that his fans would not be disappointed. Lu Gangsheng had always had an excellent reputation when it came to treating his fans. Because of this, he was deeply loved and worshipped by his fans, which indirectly strengthened the reputation of A Chinese Ghost Story. More than 10 minutes had passed since someone began to shout Lu Gangsheng's name until he appeared in front of the theater lobby. Brother Sheng. Lu Chen and Chen Fei were waiting together. That night, Lu Gangsheng was still wearing a dark blue suit and a white shirt. When he saw Lu Chen, he showed a familiar smile. "We're not late, are we?" Lu Gangsheng didn't come alone. He had a female companion with him. This female companion was in her 40s. She was tall and slender, wearing a purple evening gown. She had a graceful bearing and a beautiful face. Her long hair was dyed dark brown and fell to her shoulders. Although she was no longer young and crow's feet could be seen at the corner of her eyes when she smiled, no one would ignore her existence standing next to Lu Gangsheng. In fact, her name had already been called by many people outside. Lu Gangsheng introduced, "This is Tina, my good friend. This is Lu Chen, Chen Zai." The woman's eyes flickered. She took the initiative to extend her hand to Lu Chen and said with a sweet smile, "I've heard the Hong Kong students talk about you several times. You're really a hottie." Lu Chen quickly held her hand and said, "Hello, Sister Tina. I didn't expect you to come." Tina's Chinese name was Shifang. She was an artist who debuted at the same time as Lu Gangsheng. She was also a superstar in Xiangjiang's film, television, and music industry. Since her official debut, Shifang has released a total of 12 solo albums, with a total sales of tens of millions of records. Many of her classic songs have been popular in the country for a time, with countless fans. Shifang had also acted in many films and TV series. She had won as many awards as Lu Gangsheng in music and film, and even more in music. It was just that 5 years ago, Shifang had a serious illness. During her treatment and recovery, she had basically retired from the entertainment industry. She rarely appeared in public, but her influence was still there. Today, she had come with Lu Gangsheng to attend the premiere of A Chinese Ghost Story. Tomorrow, she would definitely make the headlines of the entertainment section. Shifang looked very good. There were rumors that she had an incurable disease. Now she must have recovered. Otherwise, it would be impossible for her to talk and laugh with people. Lu Chen introduced Chen Fei, to Shifang. Chen Fei, was also Shifang's fan. She was very excited to see her idol, and Shifang also liked Chen Fei, The two of them soon had a pleasant conversation, leaving Lu Chen and Lu Gangxing aside. Lu Gangxing shook his head a little helplessly. He asked Lu Chen, "Chen Zai, is it convenient for us to talk?" Lu Chen, "Of course, no problem." Lu Gangxing certainly didn't bring Shifang over for no reason. What he talked about with Lu Chen was not complicated. He just hoped that Lu Chen could tailor a few works for Shifang's new album. After 5 years of silence due to illness, Shifang was ready to make a comeback. She needed a new album to announce her comeback. But in terms of music, the Heavenly Queen had always been very picky. She had originally graduated from the Hong Kong Conservatory of Music. She was not lacking in professionalism and appreciation. She had high requirements for her works. She could also arrange her own lyrics and play the piano. She could also be regarded as a talented woman. However, in today's Hong Kong pop music world, what was lacking was excellent composers. The powerful and talented seniors had either retired, passed away, or had lost their inspiration. Shifang could not choose a few satisfactory songs. With her name, the agency could invite a lot of songs, but quantity did not mean quality. If Shifang was not satisfied, she would not make a comeback. The Heavenly Queen of Hong Kong was quite stubborn and would not listen to anyone. Under such circumstances, as Shifang's friend in the circle, Lu Gangxing recommended Lu Chen to her. Today's Lu Chen was no longer the person who only a few people in the circle knew when he first came to Hong Kong. His talent had been widely known, and his works were also known by more and more people. The nickname, Gold Digger, spread like wildfire in the circle. There were also many singers and entertainment agencies who came to him for songs. The best example was undoubtedly Xu Jing. At present, her new album, Time is Good, had achieved very good sales in Hong Kong and the mainland. With the two works, Summer Wind and Courage, written by Lu Chen for her, she was steadily ranked among the top female singers in Hong Kong. After listening to a few works sung and written by Lu Chen, Shifang immediately made a decision. That was why she appeared here tonight. After understanding the cause and effect, Lu Chen said without hesitation, "Brother Sheng, let's make an appointment to talk." Lu Gangxing had always appreciated Lu Chen. Without the support of this superstar, he could not have developed so smoothly in Hong Kong and could not have integrated into the circle so quickly. With this favor, how could Lu Chen not give face? Besides, writing songs for Shifang was also a very honorable thing. He did not know how many songwriters begged for it. Hearing Lu Chen agree happily, Lu Gangxing said with a smile, "Thank you." His gratitude was very sincere, which made Lu Chen's heart move. In Hong Kong's entertainment circle, Lu Gangxing and Shifang were recognized as good friends. The friendship between the two could be traced back to more than 20 years ago, which became a popular story. The two had also been rumored, but in the end, it was not true. Shifang had 2 boyfriends, but they broke up amicably and she was still single. And Lu Gangxing already had his own wife and children. On this side, Shifang and Chen Fei were almost done talking. It was almost 8 o'clock, so everyone entered together. The number 1 screening hall of the Triumph Theatre was full, and there was no special ceremony. The premiere of A Chinese Ghost Story officially began. Chapter 551. 90 minutes, 1.5 hours, and 2 classes, he could take the high-speed train from Hangzhou to Nanjing. Also, he could watch a movie in the cinema. The premiere of A Chinese Ghost Story at the Triumph Theatre started at 8 o'clock in the evening and ended at 9:30. Clap. 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 When the lights in the movie hall lit up, the silent audience seemed to have suddenly woken up from a deep sleep. No one knew who took the lead to applaud, and then the applause quickly spread throughout the audience. At first, it was a little messy, but soon it became the same rhythm, like a summer storm, fast and fierce, shaking back and forth in the theater. One by one, the guests stood up and turned to the seats where the crew members of A Chinese Ghost Story were sitting, sending their sincere and warm congratulations. As guests invited to the movie premiere, after watching the movie, no matter how they visualized it, applauding was a basic courtesy, but there were differences in etiquette. A Chinese Ghost Story received the highest respect. Among the hundreds of guests, there were representatives of film and television entertainment companies, stars and artists in the entertainment industry, media reporters and writers, and members of the Xiangjiang Film Association. They were also members of the jury of the Xiangjiang Film Support Project. These people, who represented the upper echelons of the film and television industry in Xiangjiang, could not be easily bribed. They had their own positions, their own standards of judgment, and their own preferences. It was all because of the strength of A Chinese Ghost Story that they were able to sincerely congratulate the crew members. Congratulations. The first to congratulate Lu Chen was Lu Gangsheng. You made a good movie, very good. Lu Chen held the hand of the king of Xiangjiang and said gratefully, "Thank you, brother Sheng." Lu Gangsheng patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile, "Next time there's a good script, save a role for me." Lu Chen quickly said, "That's my honor." With Lu Gangsheng's status and influence in the Xiangjiang entertainment industry, he had a lot of scripts to choose from. Countless film and television companies wanted to cooperate with him. Of course, the premise was that they could afford Lu Gangsheng's salary, which was one of the highest among the male actors in Xiangjiang. And he took the initiative to ask Lu Chen for a role, not only to give face to Lu Chen, but also to express his appreciation for A Chinese Ghost Story. Shi Fang, who was with Lu Gangsheng, interrupted, "Count me in." Lu Chen felt a little dizzy. In his memory, there was only one movie that Lu Gangsheng and Shi Fang had worked together. This movie, which was produced 10 years ago, had set a box office record in Hong Kong at that time, and had also achieved very high results in the mainland. Although the two were very good friends, this was the first time they had worked together in a movie. If Lu Chen could invite these two to join his new movie, it would definitely cause a sensation in the media without any promotion. Even if their salaries were very high, as long as the script wasn't too bad, it would be difficult for them to make a loss. The key was that they were high-class enough. Any film company that could hire these two would be considered a success. Of course, Lu Gangsheng and Shi Fang might be just being polite, so Lu Chen wouldn't lose his mind immediately. He was only stunned for a moment before he smiled and said, "I'll write the script when I get back tonight." Lu Gangsheng and Shi Fang both laughed. Shi Fang sighed and said, "I like the theme song of this movie very much." "I like it very much," she asked, "What's the name of this song?" Lu Chen replied, "The Road Changes with the People." He answered in Cantonese because the theme song was a Cantonese song. There was also a Mandarin version for the mainland. "The road changes with the people," Shi Fang softly recited these words, and a trace of disappointment appeared on her face. It seemed that she had thought of something. Lu Gangsheng quietly held her hand, then said to Lu Chen, "You should go up." Lu Chen nodded and took Chen Fei, and all the main cast members of A Chinese Ghost Story onto the stage of the theater. Lu Chen, Chen Fei, Nie Mingzhu, Ma Rongzhen, Wan Shaoquan, Chen Wenxiang. Other than Lu Chen and Chen Fei, the others were basically unknown in the film and television industry in Hong Kong. Only Ma Rongzhen was considered a senior, but he had been a flop for a long time. No one had heard of Wan Shaoquan at all. Lu Chen had only recently become famous in the circle. It could be said that the lineup of A Chinese Ghost Story was not strong at all. There were not many actors, and there were very few investments and special effects. However, the movie was unanimously approved by the picky guests. The applause lasted for a few minutes before it ended. As for the ordinary audience who were lucky enough to attend the premiere, they cheered loudly and even clapped their hands until they turned red. Thank you everyone." Lu Chen led the crew to thank the guests and the audience. Next, it was time for the interview. Many cameras had already been set up, and the long and short cameras were aimed at the actors. In particular, Lu Chen, Chen Fei, and Nie Mingzhu received the most attention from the reporters. When it was time to ask questions freely, a reporter sitting in the front row couldn't wait to stand up and said loudly, "I'm a reporter from Film Weekly. May I ask Mr. Lu Chin?" The media interview lasted for more than an hour. None of the reporters in Hong Kong were easy to deal with. Even if they also liked A Chinese Ghost Story and had received a red packet from Lu Chin's studio, they would still ask tricky questions. At this time, it was very difficult to see the ability of the interviewee. If they made a fool of themselves, they would definitely be ridiculed by some media in the newspapers tomorrow. Lu Chen was no longer a fledgling artist. The memories of the 3 lives in the dream world had also made him far wiser and more mature than his peers. Even in the face of the aggressive questions from the reporters, he still handled it with ease. After a few rounds of exchanges, although the reporters from several newspapers and websites could not say that they were convinced, they at least secretly admired Lu Chen's sophistication and cleverness. They could not find any flaws in him at all. They had no choice but to shift the focus to Chen Fei, Nie Mingzhu, and the others. "Miss Chen Fei, everyone knows that you are Lu Chen's girlfriend. You have starred in 2 TV series together, and both of them are absolute male and female leads. Why is the female lead of A Chinese Ghost Story Miss Nie Mingzhu, while you play a fierce and vicious villain?" A reporter from a certain newspaper stared at Chen Fei, and asked without blinking. Chen Fei had been in the industry for many years. What kind of reporters had she not met? Faced with such a question, she smiled and said, "It's precisely because Mr. Lu Chen and I starred in 2 TV series that I changed my role this time. This way, the audience will not be tired of it, and I can also challenge my own acting skills." She held the microphone and spoke with confidence. Her whole body was filled with a beautiful and confident aura, making it impossible for people to nitpick. In A Chinese Ghost Story, Chen Fei, was the big boss, and here, she was still the queen. Chapter 552. At 11:20 p.m. on February 18th, the premiere of A Chinese Ghost Story at the Triumph Theatre ended. The guests were very satisfied because they saw a wonderful movie and did not waste their precious time. The media reporters were also very satisfied. They had interviewed a lot of wonderful content and went back with the red packets. As for the lucky audience, they were even more speechless. When leaving the theater, some audience members were stopped by the reporters outside to interview them. They said that the movie was very wonderful and that they would buy tickets to watch it again after it was officially released. The premiere of A Chinese Ghost Story was not very grand, but the effect was very good. However, it was too early to say that the movie was a success. The real test would be after the 21st. The only thing that could prove the movie was the box office. Young Master Lu. When Lu Chen was about to leave with Chen Fei, he was stopped by Chen Wenxiang, who rushed over. "Let me introduce you to a gentleman." The gentleman that Chen Wenxiang introduced to Lu Chen was in his 50s. He had a thin face, wore glasses, and had gray temples. He gave people a feeling that he had been through hardships and had a rather elegant temperament. "This is Mr. Wang Dong." Chen Wenxiang was very respectful to this person. The Mr. he addressed was not the kind of sir or miss, but a respectful title for a highly respected senior. After knowing the identity of the other party, Lu Chen was a little moved. Lu Chen had heard of Wang Dong for a long time. This famous writer in Xiangjiang was a real scholar. He used to be a professor at Xiangjiang University, wrote for many newspapers and magazines, and published many novels that reflected various social aspects of Xiangjiang. He was also a film critic who cared about Xiangjiang's movies. A real scholar had his own style. Wang Dong never took any benefits when writing film reviews. He wrote according to his heart. Not long ago, he severely criticized The Painted Skin, and even caused the male lead of The Painted Skin, Jiang Wei, to scold him on his blog. However, Jiang Wei also suffered a lot because of this. Not only was he reprimanded by many people in the industry, but he also lost more than 100,000 fans on his blog. In the end, he had to apologize publicly. Wang Dong had offended many people in the industry, but he also had many friends. For the premiere of A Chinese Ghost Story, Lu Chen's studio and Jiayang Pictures sent out many invitations, including many well-known film critics in Hong Kong, including Wang Dong. However, neither Lu Chen nor the people from Jiayang Pictures expected Wang Dong to come. That was because Wang Dong had always bought his own tickets to watch the movies and never accepted the hospitality of the producers. Therefore, when he saw Wang Dong in person, Lu Chen couldn't help but feel surprised. He quickly stretched out his hands and said, "Hello, Teacher Wang. I didn't expect you to come as well. Please forgive me if I've neglected you." Wang Dong let out a faint smile and shook hands with Lu Chen. Then, he said, "I heard a few friends talking about you, so I came to see you. I'm not disappointed." Chen Wenxiang, who was standing at the side, was pleasantly surprised. He had been in the Xiangjiang film and television entertainment circle for decades and knew a lot of people from all walks of life. Naturally, his understanding of Wang Dong was far better than that of Lu Chen. Therefore, he was very clear that the words, "not disappointed," sounded very ordinary, but when they came out of Wang Dong's mouth, the meaning was really extraordinary. Although Lu Chen didn't understand why, he still thanked him. "Thank you." Wang Dong let go of his hand and his expression became serious. "But your movie is far from perfect. Many of the details are crude. Although the characterization of the characters is excellent, as a writer and film critic, Wang Dong's perspective on movies was undoubtedly different from that of ordinary audiences. He mainly evaluated the shortcomings of A Chinese Ghost Story from a professional and artistic point of view." Lu Chen accepted all these opinions. The filming of A Chinese Ghost Story, including post-production special effects, editing, and dubbing, only took a total of more than 2 months. Although the movie did not involve many characters and plots, time did not allow it to reach a perfect level. On the other hand, the excessive pursuit of perfection also meant a big increase in the cost. After Wang Dong finished speaking, he gave a positive affirmation. "In general, the flaws don't obscure the beauty. Work hard." After saying that, he nodded at Lu Chen and turned to leave. Why did he leave just like that? Lu Chen was a little dumbfounded. He quickly called out, "Mr. Wang, young Master Lu, you don't have to ask him to stay." Chen Wenxiang stopped him, shook his head and said, "Mr. Wang's temper is like this. He doesn't like to be polite with others." Wang Dong's temper was famous in the literary circle for being straightforward. When he talked to others, he often spoke bluntly and didn't use polite words. As a result, he had offended many people. Lu Chen said helplessly, "I still want to talk to Mr. Wang a little more." Chen Wenxiang said with a smile, "He has already told you a lot. Wait for the blog tomorrow." Chen Wenxiang was really happy. Wang Dong's influence among the young people in Xiangjiang was very weak. Many young people in Xiangjiang had never heard of him, but for those in their 40s or 50s, there were few who did not know his name. Xiangjiang people in their 40s or 50s were also an important source of box office. Since Wang Dong recognized A Chinese Ghost Story, his film review would definitely bring a lot of box office to the film and expand the audience. This was undoubtedly a good sign for A Chinese Ghost Story, which had not been officially released yet. People in Xiangjiang were very superstitious, and Chen Wenxiang was no exception. As the director of Lu Chen's studio, he had high hopes for the studio's first movie, not to mention that his daughter was also in A Chinese Ghost Story. At this moment, no one noticed Ma Rongjin, who was standing in the corner of the lobby. Tonight was like a dream for Ma Rongjin. How long had it been? Even he himself couldn't remember when was the last time he stood under the spotlight and was surrounded by reporters. This long-lost glory made Ma Rongjin feel that it was unreal. Although the reporters' attention was mainly focused on Lu Chen, Chen Fei, and Nie Mingzhu, as the most important supporting actor in A Chinese Ghost Story, he, an old actor who had been down and out for many years, still received some attention. As long as the box office of A Chinese Ghost Story was passable, it would not be a problem to find another role. There was no need to struggle every day in the Lion Rock film and television city for a chance to get a lunchbox. At this moment, Ma Rongjin prayed to the gods in the sky, hoping that the box office of A Chinese Ghost Story would be a big hit. The higher the box office of A Chinese Ghost Story, the higher his value and the higher the pay he could get. At his current stage, he really had nothing else to ask for. On February 21st, a week after The Painted Skin was released, a Chinese ghost story hit all the major cinemas in Xinjiang and began to compete for the box office. Chapter 553. A Chinese Ghost Story was officially released on Tuesday, February 21st. And just yesterday, its biggest competitor, Painted Skin, announced its first week's box office. From the 14th to the 19th, the movie co-produced by Huaguan Pictures and Star Art Entertainment had a total of 36.77 million, which was quite a dazzling result. In the past decade, Xinjiang's local movies had been in a bad situation under the impact of Hollywood blockbusters. A large number of film and television production companies had closed down, the industry's talents had left, and there were few good box office results. Although Painted Skin was a co-production, it was advertised as a Hong Kong production, so the 36.77 million box office in the first week broke the record for a Hong Kong film in the past 3 years. Huaguan Pictures and Star Art Entertainment naturally celebrated. Even Jiang Wei, who was forced to apologize for scolding Wang Dong, became active again on his blog, posting several blog posts to show off, feeling very proud of himself. But the people who didn't know the truth would think that Painted Skin was doing very well, and that the Hong Kong box office breaking the 100 million mark was just around the corner, but the people who knew the inside story had a very different view. Painted Skin's results in the first 3 days were indeed eye-catching. The 24.45 million box office was incomparable, showing a soaring momentum. However, on February 17th, Painted Skin box office suddenly dropped to 4.27 million, compared to the 16th, a drop of nearly 50%. On February 18th, Painted Skin box office 3.2 million, continuing to drop sharply. It was not until the 19th that the box office of 4.85 million showed signs of recovery, accumulating 36.77 million in the first week, and maintained around 5 million for the next 20 days. On the surface, it looked very good, a box office of 5 million a day. Many Xinjiang movies might not be able to achieve even after a few weeks of release, but it could still crush the Hong Kong films released at the same time. But an insider revealed that starting from the 19th, Huaguan Pictures and Star Art Entertainment started to push the market. To put it bluntly, they were buying box office. The so-called buying box office referred to some film producers using unfair competition to create the illusion of high box office, squeezing out competing films at the same time. That was, the producers paid for a large number of movie tickets, then gave them to the audience as gifts or sold them at a low price. Because the cinema was a scarce resource, buying box office to create false box office figures, not only would it mislead the audience's choice, but it would also cause pressure on other films. There was the phenomenon of buying box office in Hong Kong, but it was more common in China. The source was Hollywood in the United States. Chapter 554. Qi Zihao waited anxiously. Jia Hui didn't come down after 10 minutes, and of course, she didn't let Qi Zihao wait for 100 minutes. About 20 minutes later, a girl in white sportswear came down from the corridor and stood in front of him. She said shyly, "Did I keep you waiting?" Qi Zihao looked at the beautiful junior sister in front of him in a daze, feeling that his heart was about to explode. He couldn't speak. Jia Hui blushed under Qi Zihao's stare. Hey, hey, hey. At this time, a girl in yellow, about 13 or 14 years old, suddenly rushed out from behind Jia Hui. She rushed at Qi Zihao, who was still in a daze, and said, "Are you a fool? What are you doing here?" Qi Zihao was shocked and instinctively took a step back. He seemed to have just woken up from a dream. Jia Hui grabbed the girl in yellow and introduced her. "This is my sister Nihue. She wants to come with me. Is that okay?" Jia Hui's sister looked similar to her, but her character was weird, and it was obvious that she was the kind of person who was very bold and not easy to deal with. "Boy, do you want to hit on my sister? If you want to hit on her, you have to please me first, otherwise." She breathed through her nostrils and squinted at Chiziheo with an expression that said, "I'm a delinquent." Jia Hui looked helpless. Obviously, she couldn't do anything about her sister. Chiziheo was not too stupid. He came to his senses and quickly said, "No problem. Then take Sister Nihue with you." Humph. Nihue curled her lips and said, "Don't call me so intimately. I'm not your sister. Where are we going to play tonight?" Even though Nihue was a few years younger than him, Chiziheo was still a little scared to look at her. He quickly said, "Let's go to the movies. A Chinese Ghost Story is on tonight. Lu Chen and Chen Fei are the leading actors." He had heard from his friend that Nihue had recently been fascinated by a TV series called Romance in My Heart, which was on the air on satellite TV. The leading actor and actress in the series were played by Lu Chen and Chen Fei. Therefore, Chiziheo searched for information about these two celebrities online and found out about A Chinese Ghost Story. Jia Hui was pleasantly surprised. "That's great. I was just about to see it. Watching a movie again? Old-fashioned." She preferred to go to the arcade or the ice skating rink. Chiziheo couldn't care less about her feelings. Seeing that Jia Hui liked it, he finally felt relieved. Of course, there was still a small problem. He had only booked 2 movie tickets online, and he didn't know if there were any left. Fortunately, with the development of technology, smartphones could be installed with ticket booking apps. Therefore, Chiziheo used his phone to book an additional ticket for Nihue in the taxi. The tickets for tonight's official screening of A Chinese Ghost Story were selling well. He was lucky enough to catch the last bus and grab one of the last 2 tickets. Of course, it was impossible for it to be next to the seat he had originally booked. However, this was exactly what Chiziheo hoped for. However, he soon discovered that his thoughts were completely wrong. When he arrived at the cinema to pick up the tickets, Nihue directly snatched the 2 tickets next to each other and left the one that Chiziheo had just booked, leaving him speechless. After all, Chiziheo was not a fool. In such a situation, he did not foolishly stay in the corner and watch. Instead, he discussed with others and paid a price to change his seat. Finally, he sat next to Jia Hui. This made Nihue look at him in a different light. "You're not stupid, are you?" Chiziheo scratched his head with a silly smile. He looked at Jia Hui, his eyes full of joy. Jia Hui blushed again and whispered, "Let's watch a movie." The lights in the cinema dimmed, and the opening scene of the movie appeared on the big screen. The voices of the audience disappeared, and everyone's attention was focused. People in Xiangjiang liked to watch movies, and the quality of the audience was usually relatively high. During the movie, everyone would consciously keep quiet, and their mobile phones would be set to vibration mode, so as not to disturb others watching the movie. Chiziheo looked around and found that the cinema, which could accommodate nearly 200 people, was full, and most of the audience were couples. He couldn't help but sneak a glance at Jia Hui again. But Jia Hui's eyes were only fixed on the screen. Chiziheo's attention turned to her. He adjusted his sitting posture and began to enjoy the movie. The first thing that appeared on the screen was the logo of Jiayang Pictures. This logo was not very familiar to the audience in Xiangjiang, and the logo of Lu Chen's studio was even more unfamiliar. After the short opening, the movie officially began. A close-up of an old stone tablet appeared on the screen, and the 3 big words, Lanrua Temple, appeared in the audience's line of sight. The background was an ancient temple shrouded in the night. Coupled with the embellishment of the soundtrack, a kind of desolate and strange atmosphere quietly attacked, making the audience's heart involuntarily rise. Chiziheo, who was originally a little distracted, was also attracted. The story of A Chinese Ghost Story unfolded. The scholar who stayed in the ancient temple at night, the beautiful woman who quietly appeared, and the seemingly routine love encounter was the beginning of a bloodthirsty killing. In just 2 minutes, the audience was brought into a strange world. Against the background of the blood-red brocade, the 4 handwritten words, A Chinese Ghost Story, appeared, and the theme song of the movie, The Road Follows the Man, played. The protagonist, Ning Kaichen, also appeared on the stage. A down-and-out scholar trekking in the wilderness, suffering all kinds of hardships, formed a perfect match with the theme song. Qi Zihao chose to watch a Chinese ghost story because Jia Hui liked the protagonist of the movie. He himself did not like to watch this kind of supernatural and fantasy movie. He liked to watch Hollywood blockbusters. Therefore, he did not have any expectations for the movie itself. Whether it was good or bad, as long as Jia Hui was happy, it would be worth the more than 100 yuan he had just spent on the movie tickets. Well, there was also Coke, popcorn, potato chips. However, after only watching the beginning of the movie for a few minutes, Qi Zihao's interest in watching the movie was aroused, especially this theme song that was full of ancient charm. It touched his heartstrings and made him involuntarily put himself in the shoes of the protagonist. The road of life is like a long dream, the road is full of wind and frost, and the wind and frost blow against my face. There are many directions in the world of mortals, find the center of the dream, love follows the man, the road follows the man. Life is a dream and a passion, there are vague tears in the dream, where to go and where to find the direction in my heart, the wind seems to sigh softly in the dream, the road and the man are boundless. Looking at the wandering scholar on the screen and listening to the melodious melody of the theme song, Qi Zihao's mind was no longer on Jia Hui, who sat next to him. As for Jia Hui, she stared at the screen without blinking. Note, the road follows the man, lyricist/composer, Huang Zhan. Chapter 555. How dare you? How dare you rob me of my money? In the wilderness, a torrential downpour poured down. 6 or 7 burly bandits were running for their lives. Although they held sharp weapons in their hands, they couldn't hide the fear on their faces. It was as if there was some kind of demon chasing after them. Accompanied by a thunderous roar, a black-clothed warrior rushed out from behind the bandits, brazenly killing his way into the fleeing crowd. However, a swift and fierce sword light flashed, and a head flew into the sky. The blood splashed on the face of the scholar who was scared out of his wits, leaving him dumbfounded. However, the massacre was still ongoing. The black-clothed warrior brandished his sword and charged left and right, but no one was a match for him at all. In their despair, 2 bandits tried to fight back with their lives, but they were cut down by the black-clothed warrior with a single slash. In the audience, Qi Zihao's blood was boiling. He had seen a lot of Hollywood blockbusters before, and the fights in them were fierce and bloody. However, compared with the 1-minute scene in a Chinese ghost story, they were too crude and simple. They were violent but not charming. Kill a man in 10 steps, leave no trace for 1,000 miles, and leave when the deed is done, hide yourself and your name. Qi Zihao couldn't help but think of the famous lines in Li Bai's Journey of the Gallant. The scene on the screen and the exciting soundtrack made the background of the chaotic world so vivid in his eyes. There were also a few exclamations from the audience around him. The movie had just started, and the scenes in Lanrua Temple and the straw hut in the wilderness had left a deep impression on everyone, making them look forward to the rest of the plot. In other words, the audience's appetite was whetted. On the screen, the story continued. The scholar Ning Kaichen went to Guabei County to collect debts, and Feng Yu was forced to stay in the legendary Lanrua Temple. However, he was refused by the Taoist priest Yan Qixia, so he sneaked into the temple. In the middle of the night, Ning Kaichen was attracted by the music and met Nia Shaoqian. However, Nia Shaoqian suddenly showed her killing intent, and Yan Qixia saved her. Touched by Ning Kaichen's honesty and kindness, Nia Shaoqian fell in love with him, but Yan Qixia stopped her. Ning Kaichen thought that Yan Qixia was a cruel murderer and wanted to escape with Nia Shaoqian. However, Nia Shaoqian was controlled by Grandma Tree and forced her to kill Ning Kaichen to absorb his yang energy. Shaoqian could not bear to see this happen, but Granny Tree Fairy flew into a rage and personally took action. Seeing that the two of them were in danger, it was Yan Qixia who acted out of righteousness and heavily injured Granny. At this moment, Ning Kaichen knows that Shaoqian is a wandering ghost. To be honest, the reason why Chi Zihao booked the movie tickets for A Chinese Ghost Story through his phone yesterday was entirely because Jiahui liked the two main leads. He sat here to make his sweetheart happy. But now, Chi Zihao himself was fascinated by it. In the film, Ning Kaichen was a little pedantic and cowardly, but he still maintained a kind heart in the troubled world. For the sake of his loved ones, he showed extraordinary courage in the face of real danger. Chi Zihao saw his own shadow in him, and he naturally immersed himself in it. He followed the ups and downs of the protagonist in the film, and his mood rose and fell. He was fascinated and entranced. Until a low cry of surprise came from beside him. Ah! In the movie, the boss, Granny Tree Fairy, used powerful magic to fight fiercely with Yan Qixia. The scene was particularly horrifying, and the audience was shocked, including Jiahui. Completely out of instinctive fear, she subconsciously grabbed Chi Zihao's hand. Chi Zihao was stunned for a moment before he came to his senses. Jiahui's hand was a little cold, and her skin was soft and delicate. The feeling of touch made his face instantly turn red. God bless him, this was the first time in his life that Chi Zihao had such intimate contact with a girl other than his sister, and the other party was the person he liked. Great joy instantly rushed to Chi Zihao's head, causing him to be in a trance for a moment. He did not even have time to watch the exciting movie, and only hoped that time would stop at this moment forever. Unfortunately, only a few minutes later, Jiahui came to her senses and quickly retracted her hand shyly. Chi Zihao's heart was indescribably disappointed. Fortunately, there was still a movie to watch. In the movie, Ning Kaichen knew that Nie Xiaoqian was controlled by Granny Tree Fairy because her bones were abandoned in the mountains. She was forced to look for strong men every night for Granny Tree Fairy to absorb yang essence, so that Granny Tree Fairy could increase her lifespan. In order to prevent Xiaoqian from being humiliated again, Ning Kaichen promised to transport her ashes back to the countryside for burial. Unexpectedly, Xiaoqian was taken away by the Witch of Black Mountain as his wife. Ning Kaichen begged Yan Qixia to go with him to save Xiaoqian. Yan Qixia tried hard to persuade Ning Kaichen, but to no avail. Finally, Yan Qixia took Ning Kaichen to the underworld, and finally rescued Xiaoqian, so that she could be reincarnated. But in this way, Ning Kaichen and Nie Xiaoqian were separated forever. This was the end of the story. The ending was not a perfect reunion, leaving the audience infinite melancholy. With the appearance of the subtitles, the lights in the movie hall slowly lit up, and it was time to leave. But many audience members did not immediately get up, still immersed in the movie. Jiahui wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes and said to Chi Zihao, "Let's go." Chi Zihao suddenly had an idea, or it could be said that he was impulsive. Without thinking, he took Jiahui's little hand and asked, "Jiahui, this movie is very good. Let's watch it again." Jiahui did not expect that Chi Zihao would be so bold to take her hand in public. Her round face was suddenly stained with a layer of red, and she subconsciously struggled. But her strength was very light. Hey, what are you doing?" Nihue was still the shrewd one. She immediately slapped away Chi Zihao's hand and said, "Don't take advantage of my sister." Chi Zihao's courage disappeared in an instant. He hid his hand and said embarrassedly, then, he was very scared, afraid that Jiahui would hate him because of this. "Let's watch it again." He was about to say, "Forget it," when Jiahui suddenly said, "It is very good." Her voice fell in Chi Zihao's ears like the sound of nature. He was so happy that he was about to explode. Okay, I'll go out and buy the movie tickets right now." Nihue snorted and took the opportunity to blackmail him, "Buy more snacks. I want spiced beef jerky and Haagen-Dazs ice cream, big ones." Chi Zihao did not care at all. For tonight's date, he had taken out his savings from working. As long as Jiahui was happy. And the conversation between the two was heard by the other audience members who were leaving, and several couples also discussed to watch the movie again. "It is very good. I also want to watch it again. Nie Xiaoqian is so beautiful. Let's go buy the tickets. Maybe there are no tickets left. Let's go." Chapter 556. When Chiziheo came out of the cinema with the two girls, it was already 11:00 at night. A Chinese Ghost Story was 90 minutes long, and it would take 3 hours to watch it again. Plus the interval in between, it was naturally very late after watching the second scene. Jia Hui began to worry. Oh, it's so late. My family must be worried. Nihue didn't care. What are you afraid of? They haven't called yet. It's not too late now. Chiziheo said considerately, I'll send you home now. We'll take a taxi. When they came, the three of them took the subway. It was cheap, but it was definitely not as convenient as a taxi. Chiziheo finally became courageous at night. He knew that he must not be stingy to please girls. He used the holidays to make money. Wasn't it for this moment? Jia Hui hesitated. That's too expensive. At night, Chiziheo treated her and Nihue to 2 episodes of A Chinese Ghost Story. He even bought a lot of snacks to stuff into Nihue's mouth. There were definitely at least 300 to 400 yuan. Chiziheo, like her, was obviously not a child of a rich family. Taxis in Xiangjiang were not cheap. Before she finished speaking, her sister Nihue pulled her and ran forward. Don't be long-winded. We'll take a taxi. Jia Hui was dragged away by Nihue, and Chiziheo hurriedly followed behind them. But when he passed by the peripheral products store at the entrance of the cinema, his footsteps involuntarily slowed down. The small shop near the movie theater was doing well. There were a lot of people crowded inside, most of them couples. And the place where they gathered was a large promotional poster of A Chinese Ghost Story. Obviously, everyone was buying the peripheral products of A Chinese Ghost Story. Chiziheo was a little surprised. He didn't notice it when he first came. He didn't expect that this ghost movie would have peripheral products for sale. Generally speaking, the peripheral products sold in Xiangjiang cinemas were basically from Hollywood blockbusters, especially comic book heroes. Ah, look at this Ning Kaichen doll. It's so cute. I want to buy it. Boss, I want this set of figurines. I like Yan Qixia. This sword is so handsome. How much is it? I want Nia Xiaoqian. The voices of the customers in the store made Chiziheo's footsteps to the door become hesitant. Just as he walked to the door, he stopped, touched his pocket, and showed a struggling look on his face. After a while, Chiziheo clenched his teeth, turned around, and rushed toward the store. When he ran out of the cinema, the two girls had been waiting outside for 4 or 5 minutes. Jia Hui was not angry or dissatisfied, but Nihue shouted, "Did you fall into a latrine pit? We've been waiting for such a long time that even our family has called us." They thought that Chiziheo had gone to the toilet. Chiziheo did not dare to provoke Nihue. He quickly walked up to Jia Hui and handed her the items he had just bought. Hui, this is for you." What he gave Jia Hui was a limited edition doll set of A Chinese Ghost Story. There were a total of 4 dolls in the set, namely Ning Kaichen, Nia Xiaoqian, Yan Qixia, and Granny Treyant. This set of dolls was very exquisitely made. The clothes, accessories, and hair were all custom-made according to the stills. The characters were lifelike, and there was even a hint of cuteness in them. They looked very beautiful in the wooden box. Of course, the precondition for beauty was the price. A set cost 388 yuan without any discount. Chiziheo grabbed the last set. Ah! Jia Hui did not expect that Chiziheo had just gone to buy a movie doll for her. She was stunned. She blushed again and quickly waved her hand. "This is too expensive. I can't take it." Nihue's eyes lit up. Without hesitation, she grabbed it and said, "Sister, if you don't want it, it's mine." Jia Hui was embarrassed and anxious. Nihue. She actually liked this set of dolls very much, but she did not want Chiziheo to spend so much money. She was very conflicted. Chiziheo scratched his head and said, "Let's go." Chiziheo stopped a taxi on the side of the road and sent the two sisters downstairs. "Goodbye, Hui," Jia Hui, who had not spoken along the way, nodded and pulled Nihue up the stairs. Chi Zihao watched the two figures disappear at the top of the stairs, feeling lost. He stood quietly in the same place for a moment, then turned around and was ready to leave. His own house was nearby, so he let the taxi go first just now to avoid spending more money. The date at night cost a lot of money that Chi Zihao had saved from working. But he did not feel the slightest bit of heartache. Chi Zihao had just taken a few steps when he suddenly heard a familiar call behind him. He turned his head in shock and saw that Jia Hui, who had just gone upstairs, had run down again and ran to him. "Thank you." After saying thank you, Jia Hui tiptoed and kissed Chi Zihao's face like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. Then, she ran away like a frightened rabbit and disappeared back up the stairs in the blink of an eye. Chi Zihao seemed to have been petrified. After a long time, he was awakened by the cold wind blowing through the long street. He raised his head in disbelief and touched the place on his face where Jia Hui had kissed. He giggled. Booking 2 tickets for A Chinese Ghost Story was undoubtedly the most correct and luckiest thing he had done. On February 21st, A Chinese Ghost Story was officially released in various cinemas in Xiangjiang and earned 3.28 million yuan on the first day with 75% screening. The box office of The Painted Skin on that day was 5.9 million, nearly twice that of A Chinese Ghost Story. Judging from the box office data, The Painted Skin, which had been released for a week, had completely crushed A Chinese Ghost Story. The latter seemed to be unable to pose a threat to the former's market position at all. However, many people in the industry learned a piece of news at the same time, a piece of news that surprised them. That was, the peripheral products of A Chinese Ghost Story had sold 2.65 million yuan on the same day. With the box office, it was 5.93 million yuan, surpassing The Painted Skin by 30,000 yuan. The Painted Skin also had peripheral products, but they were very few. There were only a few sets of posters, and the sales were negligible. This was inconceivable. After all, when people found out that Lu Chen's studio had spent money to order a large number of A Chinese Ghost Story peripherals, many people in the industry talked about it as a joke. They felt that Lu Chen did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. Movie peripherals were the patent of Hollywood blockbusters. A China-Hong Kong co-production with a mere investment of 20 to 30 million actually produced a large number of peripherals. That was equivalent to throwing money into the water and waiting to be left in the warehouse to collect dust. However, the reality was not as these people had imagined. A Chinese Ghost Story actually exceeded 2 million yuan on the first day. If there was nothing fishy about it, then that meant that this movie had great potential. Chapter 557. Movie peripherals refer to products developed according to the characters, scenes, props, logos, etc., including toys, clothing, accessories, audio and video, books, daily necessities, etc., mainly relying on the popularity and influence brought by the movie's release. In Hollywood, movie peripherals have long formed a huge and mature industry. Many movies may only earn back the cost at the box office, but relying on the sales of peripherals, they still make a lot of money. According to the 2016 statistics of the Motion Picture Association of America, peripherals contributed more than 30% to the Hollywood film industry. 2/3 of the income of many movies came from the sales of peripherals. This was undoubtedly an extremely tempting big cake. However, it was very difficult to eat the cake. China and Xiangjiang had also started the development of movie peripherals very early, but the results were completely unsatisfactory. 2 years ago, Baodalong Pictures, a big shot in the Xiangjiang film industry, invested 170 million to shoot the Hong Kong adaptation of Superhero, with the intention of replicating the Hollywood model, making a big fist in the field of peripherals, and creating a big IP of Hong Kong comic heroes. It could be said to be ambitious. However, this Hong Kong blockbuster, with a total investment of more than 200 million plus the publicity costs, only earned 68 million in Hong Kong in the end. Including the domestic box office, it barely reached 300 million, a huge loss. At that time, Baodalong Pictures also spent 12 million on the peripherals of Superhero, ordering a large number of puppet figurines, prop models, accessories, daily necessities, etc. In the end, the total sales in Xiangjiang and the mainland was only 5.1 million. It should be known that the profit of movie peripherals was very high. The cost of a set of puppet figurines was 100, and the sales price was at least 300 or 400. Compared with the investment cost of 12 million, the 5.1 million sales was a huge loss. Superhero also borrowed the fame of the original comic to sell some peripherals, otherwise the loss would be even greater. In the end, Baodalong Pictures was forced to destroy a large number of backlog of finished products, becoming a joke in the industry. In fact, if it wasn't for Baodalong Pictures' overconfidence that led to a wrong prediction, the 5.1 million peripheral sales would still be possible, because most of the mainland and Xiangjiang movies did not have any peripherals, and what they had were just cheap posters and the like. The example of Superhero also made people in the industry flinch from peripheral products. They watched Hollywood blockbusters eat meat, and it became the most common phenomenon to be envious but not to do anything. Therefore, when everyone learned that A Chinese Ghost Story had sold 65 million yuan on the first day of its release, their first feeling was disbelief. They could not believe it at all. A Chinese Ghost Story was not a drama adapted from a popular manga, so it lacked a fan base. Although everyone was familiar with Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio, this was a supernatural film, so it was not suitable for the genre. However, it was even more impossible to falsify the sales. First of all, Luchin Studio and Jiayang Pictures did not have the ability to make the cinemas in Hong Kong cooperate with them to fabricate the sales figures. Second, it was completely unnecessary. This was because the sales of peripherals were not about buying ticket sales. Wouldn't spending money on their own peripherals be idiots? Therefore, when the news was confirmed to be true, everyone's second reaction was disbelief. It was unbelievable. But regardless of whether they believed it or not, the industry professionals' evaluation of A Chinese Ghost Story suddenly increased by a large margin. This movie was trending to be very popular. It was very simple. If the audience didn't like the movie to a certain extent, why would they be willing to spend money to buy peripheral products that were more expensive than the movie tickets? It had sold 65 million yuan on the first day. How much could it sell in the 4-week release period? If Hong Kong could sell so much, how much could it sell in mainland China, which was Lu Chen's home ground? No one could make an accurate estimate. It was embarrassing to say more or less. Everyone had to admire Lu Chen. To sell so many peripherals, he had to first lay out so many goods and stock up. Lu Chen dared to spend money on peripherals that were regarded as forbidden areas by countless of his peers. Whether it was courage or confidence, they were undoubtedly very strong. And he had a high chance of winning the bet. This made more people turn their attention to A Chinese Ghost Story. Those in the industry who had been watching coldly from the sidelines or disdainful of the film had changed their minds. Many people even got someone to book tickets for A Chinese Ghost Story. No matter how much the advertisements in newspapers and websites were exaggerated, it was better to see it with one's own eyes. There are not many people I, Zhou Yi, truly admire in my life. Seeing Lu Chen, Zhou Yi said with great emotion, "Young Master Lu, you are definitely one of them." As soon as he got the first day box office and peripheral sales data of A Chinese Ghost Story, the behind-the-scenes boss of Jiayang Pictures could not sit still and personally went to the studio to look for Lu Chen. Zhou Yi was not a boring person, and in fact, Jiayang Pictures was not the most important business under his name. However, this heavy sales data made him unable to remain calm. More than 2 million in sales of peripheral products. Thanks to policy factors, after the movies made by Hong Kong film companies were released in Hong Kong, they received a much higher share than their counterparts in the mainland, almost 50%. In other words, with a box office of 1 million yuan, the film company could get 500,000 yuan or more. This was one of the important reasons why so many film companies could survive even though the local market of Hong Kong was small. However, a 50% or 60% share of the box office was nothing compared to the profits of peripheral products. As a rather successful businessman, Zhou Yi was well versed in the ways of this. What made Zhou Yi feel ashamed was that when Lu Chen decided to invest a large amount of money in customizing the peripheral products of A Chinese Ghost Story, he was against it. He could learn from the mistakes of superhero. However, Lu Chen was stubborn and would rather invest all of his money than give up. In the end, Zhou Yi reluctantly agreed to Lu Chen's peripheral development plan out of consideration for maintaining the relationship between the two parties. He still had a knot in his heart. Now that he thought about it, if he had missed it at that time, he would probably regret it till his intestines turned green. "Boss Zhou, you flatter me," Lu Chen smiled and invited Zhou Yi to sit down for a chat. He asked his assistant, Li Zhen, to pour tea for the guests. Even if Zhou Yi did not come, he was prepared to talk to him. Zhou Yi said solemnly, "First of all, I came here to apologize to young Master Lu. As a partner, Jiayang Pictures has not done its best in the past. Please forgive me." As he spoke, he actually stood up and bowed to Lu Chen to apologize. Lu Chen quickly stood up and said, "Boss Zhou, you're too kind. There's no need to do this. There's really no need." Speaking of which, in the early days of cooperation, especially when faced with the threat from the Jiang family, Jiayang Pictures' indecisive performance made Lu Chen very dissatisfied. However, it was still very good later on. Without the strong support and cooperation of Jiayang Pictures, A Chinese Ghost Story would not have been released so smoothly. Chapter 558. Lu Chen still clearly remembered Chen Wenxiang's evaluation of Zhou Yi. Zhou Yi was a real businessman. A real businessman knew how to judge the situation. When faced with a choice, he would always choose the one that was most beneficial to him. If he needed to put down his pride, he would never put on airs. A real businessman could not be a real friend. Lu Chen would not treat Zhou Yi as a friend, but as a business partner, it would be fine. So after the two sides reached a consensus, he got down to business. "The number of screenings for our new film is too low. I hope Boss Zhou can put more effort in this area." The number of screenings for A Chinese Ghost Story on the first day was less than 20%. It was not too bad, but it did not meet Lu Chen's expectations. It was the task of Jiayang Pictures to communicate with the cinemas in Hong Kong. Lu Chen's studio had just established itself in Hong Kong. It needed to expand its channels in all aspects. It lacked connections and resources in the industry, so it needed a partner like Jiayang Pictures. Zhou Yi smiled and said, "Don't worry, young Master Lu. I believe that no cinema can ignore our results. I have already sent someone to discuss with Wanli and Diqing. I believe it will not be a problem to increase the number of screenings." Wanli and Diqing were the two major cinema chains in Hong Kong. They jointly owned more than 60% of the cinemas in Hong Kong and played an important role in Hong Kong's film industry. The famous Oriental Hollywood Theatre was a big cinema under Wanli Cinema. Zhou Yi said confidently, "Our number of screenings is not high now, mainly because The Painted Skin bought a share of the box office. But if Hugwan and Star Art can buy a week's box office, they can't buy a month's." Buying the box office was an unspoken rule in the industry. The rich and powerful often played it, but there must be a limit. The scale of Hong Kong's film market was small. Spending a few million could occupy a considerable share of screenings. But unless one was extremely willful, no one would throw money desperately into the water. In order to support The Painted Skin, Hugwan and Star Art bought the box office for 4 days in a row. In Zhou Yi's view, they were basically close to their limit. On the other hand, if this kind of cheating exceeded the limit, it would also attract public anger in the industry. If it went too far, no one would be willing to play. Therefore, Zhou Yi was very certain that the high box office earnings of The Painted Skin would not last long. Once its true colors were revealed, it would be the day of A Chinese Ghost Story's strong counterattack. The cinema chains were not fools. They knew very well what was going on, so it was reasonable for them to increase the number of screenings for A Chinese Ghost Story in advance. Most importantly, the surprising peripheral sales of A Chinese Ghost Story were undoubtedly equivalent to stimulants. It was enough to stimulate the sensitive nerves of the cinema chains and make them make a wise choice. The truth was not unexpected. On February 22, the number of screenings for A Chinese Ghost Story in Hong Kong increased to 22.67%. Many of the screenings were added on that day, and the box office exceeded the 4 million mark. The box office sales continued to rise amidst the exclamations of the industry, reaching 3.58 million. At the same time, Painted Skin, which had been holding on for a few days, finally showed its true signs of decline. On the 22nd, the box office earnings were only 3.1 million, completely behind A Chinese Ghost Story. This was more or less out of the expectations of the industry. Everyone had thought that in order to suppress A Chinese Ghost Story, the Painted Skin would continue to buy the box office for a few more days. They did not expect it to admit defeat so quickly. Then, insider news came out. It was said that because the real box office results were too bad, there was a serious disagreement between Huaguan Pictures and Star Art Entertainment. Not to mention continuing to buy the box office, even publicity was facing problems. In just 2 days, A Chinese Ghost Story had completed a beautiful counterattack and was showing signs of soaring. On the internet, a large number of netizens' comments about A Chinese Ghost Story emerged, including many articles by film critics. Wang Dong was one of them. As an independent film critic, Wang Dong had a habit of writing film reviews. He would not publish his own film reviews before the official release of the movie, even if he had watched the premiere in advance. A Chinese Ghost Story was no exception. After Wang Dong was invited to attend the premiere of A Chinese Ghost Story, he wrote a film review article, but it was not until 2 days after the official release of the movie that he published it on his blog. When I first watched A Chinese Ghost Story, I thought that it was a fantasy ghost movie similar to Painted Skin. I even mocked the filmmakers of today for not having any creativity. They changed the story in Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio, added some celebrities' faces and special effects, and then brought it to the table to fool the audience. It was really boring. However, after watching the movie, I realized that although they were both based on Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio, A Chinese Ghost Story and Painted Skin were works of completely different levels. The two could not be compared at all. A Chinese Ghost Story is so much better than Painted Skin. Dressed in a coarse green robe, a shabby little hat, and a pair of worn cloth shoes, this was the image that the protagonist, Ning Kaichen, gave to everyone. Life was full of misfortunes. He had a youthful talent, but there was no place for him to use it. As a result, he was ridiculed by the peddlers who sold paintings as having high taste but low status. But even so, he did not lose the loveliness that was in his bones. He was naive, pedantic, but also affectionate, positive, and optimistic. He was born at the wrong time, but he did not feel depressed at all. As for Nie Xiaoqian, she was a ghost who died in a foreign land. She was a female ghost who lived in a barren mountain and specialized in sucking the essence of young men. But this was not her intention. Every time she heard a passerby, her heart would be tortured by endless self-blame and grief. She was beautiful and kind. Although she was forced by the despotic power of the tree fairy, and although all the demons and ghosts around her were bloodthirsty, she still held on to her conscience alone. She was unique in that dirty and dark world. The meeting of the male and female protagonists was an accident, but it was also fate. A poignant love story connected the whole movie. Even if the ending was not perfect, it was still very touching. The plot of the whole movie was compact, the story was exciting, and the soundtrack and theme song were first class. There was another character in the movie that left a deep impression, and that was Yan Qixia. He was a little crazy and a little drunk. He was heroic and slayed demons. His laughter and curses were almost humorous, showing us the profound skills of an experienced actor. I dare to say that A Chinese Ghost Story will become a classic among ghost movies, Wang Dong's long review blog post was more than 2,000 words long. It was the longest film review he had ever written. It could be said that it was full of praises. The whole post was full of praises, making people wonder if he had received some benefits from the film producer. However, anyone who had seen A Chinese Ghost Story would not have such doubts. Chapter 559. In today's era of material desires, Wang Dong was undoubtedly a rather unusual existence. He wrote articles and film reviews and only spoke according to his own wishes instead of being driven by profits. Such people were rare, so Wang Dong was respected by many people. He had his own influence in the Hong Kong literary and film circles. His blog articles and reposts had always been very high. Wang Dong had written a lot of film review articles, mainly focusing on the movies produced in Xinjiang. Due to the fact that Xinjiang's movies had gone from prosperity to decline in the past 10 years, he criticized more and praised less, leaving a strict impression on others. Therefore, when Wang Dong's long film review article praising A Chinese Ghost Story was released, it inevitably caused a small sensation both inside and outside the circle. Even those who did not usually watch movies were interested in this film. Was it really that good? Some people were amazed, some were curious, and some were skeptical. However, on Hong Kong blogs, there were many people who supported Wang Dong's views. They were all Hong Kong netizens who had watched the film. A Chinese Ghost Story is a good film. I strongly recommend it. It's been a long time since I've seen such a sincere ghost film. The characters and plot are first class. At least 9 points. The special effects are also good. Although there are not many scenes, it's very exciting. I like Yan Qixia very much. I took my girlfriend to watch it tonight. The 70 yuan was well spent. Then, when she came out, she saw the peripherals and insisted on buying a set. She spent another few hundred yuan. Her wallet is crying. Compared to A Chinese Ghost Story, the painted skin is simply trash. In the era of the internet, everyone was a netizen. Freedom of speech had reached an unprecedented level. Anyone could speak freely and express their opinions after registering an account on a blog forum. The same was true for film reviews. In the past, ordinary people could only watch film critics express their opinions on newspapers or television. Now, they could participate in it themselves. Everyone could be a film critic. Although the comments of ordinary netizens could not compare to Wang Dong's film review article in terms of content and depth of thought, their feelings were the most intuitive and real, and their influence was more extensive. The praise for A Chinese Ghost Story spread from Hong Kong blogs to Hong Kong forums, especially in the film and television section, where it became a hot topic. Unlike the fake reviewers who were paid to post, the commenters of A Chinese Ghost Story were mostly experienced IDs. Their posts were more meaningful and credible. It was very rare to see such a one-sided wave of praise in the Hong Kong forum film and television section. Even if there were critics of A Chinese Ghost Story, most of them would use the words, "The flaws do not obscure the brilliance." They felt that the movie's flaws could not cover up its strengths, and that it was worth recommending. Many people believed that this was one of the best Hong Kong films in the past decade. The story, background, special effects, and soundtrack all had strong local characteristics. These praises and recommendations from the internet affected many ordinary netizens. Naturally, it played a good role in promoting the box office of A Chinese Ghost Story. The power of reputation was powerful. On the 23rd of February, the box office of A Chinese Ghost Story reached 5.77 million yuan, rising for 2 consecutive days. Furthermore, the number of online ticket bookings increased greatly. On the 24th, most of the primetime tickets in the cinemas were fully booked. Under such circumstances, coupled with the full public relations of Jiayang Pictures, by the 24th, the number of screenings of A Chinese Ghost Story soared to 35%, showing a blowout trend. The market was very sensitive, and the market was very realistic. Whether it was a large cinema chain or a small or medium-sized cinema, they were naturally willing to leave their precious audience seats to those popular films, regardless of what kind of film it was. Not only did A Chinese Ghost Story have excellent box office sales, but it also had a good reputation. It was also a Hong Kong co-production, and the peripheral products were also very popular. In the eyes of the cinemas, it was like a hen that laid golden eggs. In the past, the shops in the cinemas sold Hollywood blockbusters. Although they sold very well, the cost of these peripherals was very high, and the profit left for the cinemas was low. In contrast, the peripheral products of A Chinese Ghost Story gave the cinemas a much higher share. No one would say that money was too hot. Therefore, there was no need for Lu Chen's studio to communicate with Jiayang Pictures. Many cinemas took the initiative to place the peripheral products of A Chinese Ghost Story in the most conspicuous position, and also put up large advertisements so that the audience would not ignore it. On the 24th of February, the box office of A Chinese Ghost Story continued to rise with the increase in the number of screenings, reaching 7.24 million, completely crushing other films that were released at the same time, including a Hollywood blockbuster that had been released for 3 weeks. A Chinese Ghost Story was popular, and it was going to be very popular. Even those who had prejudices could only remain silent and could not criticize it. This film did not even buy a single yuan in the box office. As for The Painted Skin, which had a vigorous publicity campaign and had bought a lot of box office tickets, under a lot of bad reviews, the box office fell below 1 million on the 23rd, and only 580,000 on the 24th. It was simply terrible. Moreover, the screening rate of The Painted Skin had dropped to less than 10%. Anyone with a discerning eye knew that the producers of The Painted Skin, Huaguan Pictures, and Star Art Entertainment, had already given up. They had invested too much in the early stages of the film, and the high box office that came from the high cost was just a flash in the pan. If they continued to hold on, it would be equivalent to throwing money into a bottomless pit. Therefore, as long as the leaders of the two companies were not too stupid, they should make a wise decision. The Painted Skin had already suffered a huge loss in the Hong Kong market, and there was no way to turn it around. Moving to the mainland market was the only choice. According to the judgment of the industry, The Painted Skin was very likely to be removed from the Xiangjiang cinema chain in advance. In late February 2017, the fiasco of The Painted Skin, which had invested more than 100 million yuan, became one of the reasons why A Chinese Ghost Story soared to the sky, sweeping the market unstoppably. On Monday, the 27th of February, the official blog of A Chinese Ghost Story in Hong Kong announced that the film had accumulated a box office of 45 million in 6 days, becoming the well-deserved box office champion. It had also greatly broken the previous record set by The Painted Skin. In addition to the extremely beautiful box office, A Chinese Ghost Story also sold another 24 million yuan of peripheral products. The former was fine, but the latter was simply blinding the eyes of the people in the industry. This kind of peripheral sales was completely not inferior to many Hollywood blockbusters. How much was the investment for A Chinese Ghost Story? It was only 30 million yuan. After a week of screening, it would almost recover its cost. After that, it would all be profitable, and there was an even larger mainland market. Therefore, many Xiangjiang film companies were envious and planned to follow the trend to make a profit. Chapter 560. Uncle Ma. As Ma Rongjin walked down the stairs, a middle-aged man who happened to pass by greeted him warmly. "Where are you going? Have you had dinner?" Ma Rongjin nodded and said, "There's a party tonight. I'm going now." "It must be in a high-end hotel." The middle-aged man said in an exaggerated tone, "You are a big star now. You won't be staying here for long, right? You will definitely stay in a hotel every day in the future. Grandma will be blessed." Ma Rongjin smiled faintly and did not respond to the man's words. The man was his neighbor, and they did not have much contact. At most, they would just nod at each other, and Ma Rongjin knew that this man secretly despised him, the old him. Ever since Ma Rongjin's A Chinese Ghost Story was released in Hong Kong and sold well at the box office, as the actor of Yan Qixia, an important character in the film, his fame and popularity had suddenly increased. There were interviews from reporters, people who called him to make movies, and people who wanted to be his agent. Ma Rongjin's rented house in Tianshui suddenly became crowded, and then the neighbors, whether they knew him or not, greeted him warmly with a smile. There were many neighbors who knew Ma Rongjin in the past, but few of them were so friendly and enthusiastic. Usually, when people talked about him, they said that his wife cheated on him, his career was ruined, and he could only be laughed at. Now that he had turned over a new leaf, everything had become different. The fickleness of human nature and the fickleness of the world were nothing more than this. After experiencing prosperity, vanity, and wandering, Ma Rongjin had long been indifferent, and he did not let it get to his head. After a few polite words, he turned around and was ready to leave. Tonight, Lu Qin Studio and Jiayang Pictures would hold a celebration party at the Shangri-La Hotel to celebrate the box office of A Chinese Ghost Story, breaking 50 million, and Ma Rongjin would definitely attend. Just then, a black Mercedes-Benz steadily stopped beside him. Ma Rongjin could not help but be surprised. Tianshui, where he rented, was the civilian area of Hong Kong. The urban construction and environment could not be compared with the prosperous commercial area at all. There were privately built houses everywhere, and the narrow streets were filled with sewage and garbage. A luxury Mercedes-Benz worth millions appearing here was like winning the lottery. The next moment, the window of the back seat of the Mercedes-Benz rolled down, and a fat head popped out. "Brother Ma." Ma Rongjin was stunned. She took a closer look and recognized the man. Boss Gao? Ma Rongjin had been in the industry for decades. Back then, he had also been famous. He knew many people in and out of the industry. Although he did not have much contact with them after he died, he did not lose his memory. This Gao Hongda was the boss of Gao Xing Pictures, which had now been renamed as Gao Xing Entertainment. He was quite a figure in the film and television entertainment industry, and his character was smooth and shrewd. Ma Rongjin had acted in a movie produced by Gao Xing Pictures in the past, and the box office was not bad. Because of that, he became friends with Gao Hongda. However, when he was down and out, he wanted to ask Gao Hongda for help, but he was rejected by the other party. Now that she saw Gao Hongda again, Ma Rongjin couldn't help but recall her past and became a little absent-minded. Gao Hongda opened the car door and got out. He patted Ma Rongjin's shoulder with a smile and said in the tone of an old friend, "We haven't seen each other for more than 10 years, right? I can't believe you still remember me." Ma Rongjin was awakened by Gao Hongda's pat. She smiled faintly and said, "It has been 10 years. He was really very emotional in his heart. If it was a narrow-minded person who had experienced the same experience as Ma Rongjin, he would definitely not have a good face to Gao Hongda. Maybe he would have ridiculed a few words to vent the resentment of being rejected. But Ma Rongjin had no prejudice against Gao Hongda. At that time, there were many people who rejected him, and most of the reason was because of him. Time was also fate, and he couldn't blame others. Of course, Ma Rongjin wouldn't treat Gao Hongda as a friend. He was just curious about the other party's intention. "Boss Gao, what can I do for you?" Gao Hongda said, "Are you going to Shangri-La to participate in the victory party tonight? I can give you a ride on the way. How about we have a chat?" "On the way?" Ma Rongjin didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he didn't refuse. "Then I'll have to trouble you, Boss Gao." In fact, he had already guessed Gao Hongda's intention. The two got in the car together. The Mercedes-Benz started again and slowly drove out of the narrow alley. The middle-aged neighbor looked at the luxury car in the distance with great envy and spat on the ground. Who would have thought that Ma Rongjin, who was so miserable that he couldn't afford to eat meat, had turned his life around? In the car, Gao Hongda looked out through the window and said, "Brother Ma, you've been wronged all these years. Now you've finally seen the light. Why do you still live here?" Ma Rongjin smiled and didn't say anything. Seeing that Ma Rongjin didn't fall for the trap, Gao Hongda said straightforwardly, "Brother Ma, Lu Qin Studio doesn't pay you well, does it? I have a movie that's about to start shooting. How about you help me? We can talk about the pay." Sure enough, it was as expected. Ma Rongjin wasn't surprised at all. Gao Hongda wasn't the first to ask him to shoot a movie. The popularity of A Chinese Ghost Story made him, an old salted fish, completely change his life, and all kinds of invitations came one after another. After thinking about it, Ma Rongjin said sincerely, "Boss Gao, I can't answer you for the time being. Why don't we make an appointment to talk about it?" This was Ma Rongjin's tactfulness and sophistication. He didn't care about the grudges of the past, and he wouldn't sell himself out with a few words. It was best to let the agent talk about the pay and other things. A brilliant agent could guarantee the interests of the artists to the greatest extent. Although Ma Rongjin didn't have an agent now, with his current reputation, it wasn't difficult to find a reliable one. Another reason why Ma Rongjin didn't want to agree rashly was that he didn't know if Lu Chen needed him. If Lu Chen had a new movie for him to shoot, he would be willing to do it even if he didn't have a penny. It was because he was used to the fickleness of the world that he understood how difficult it was to help in times of need. Gao Hongda also didn't expect to settle Ma Rongjin with a few words. However, since the latter didn't refuse on the spot, it meant that there was a possibility of cooperation. It was just a matter of how much the price was. As long as it was worth the price, Boss Gao wasn't afraid of spending money. He smiled and agreed, "No problem." The two of them chatted and laughed, talking about interesting anecdotes in the circle, as if they were old friends who hadn't seen each other for many years. The Mercedes-Benz drove out of the alley and entered the main road, then immediately merged into the rolling traffic. Hong Kong was shrouded in the night, and the lights were blurred. Chapter 561. Under the same night sky, some people were happy, while others were sad. Although it was already past 7:00 in the evening, there were still many employees working overtime in the Xiangjiang branch of Huaguan Pictures in Shanghuan. The office area was shrouded in an invisible, depressing atmosphere. Everyone was cautious, and even the strength of their typing became much softer, as if hitting the key points would bring disaster. This kind of low pressure lasted in the company for a few days. However, a week ago, the situation was completely different. The box office of Painted Skin, produced by Huaguan Pictures and Star Art Entertainment, crushed its competitors. It could be said that it was incomparably glorious, and they held a celebration party early. At that time, the atmosphere in the office was very relaxed, and everyone was full of energy. The common goal was to make the box office of Painted Skin break the 100 million mark in Hong Kong, and then pursue the victory to the mainland. But who would have thought that in just a few days, the situation would take a turn for the worse? The box office of Painted Skin dropped so much that it made people vomit blood, and the market reputation was terrible. Not to mention breaking 100 million, even breaking 50 million was already an extravagant hope. Such a situation of ups and downs really made people at a loss. Many employees even became confused because of this. They didn't know how long they could work in this job. Would Huaguan Pictures, which had suffered a crushing defeat, withdraw from Hong Kong? In fact, the same question was being asked to Cui Xingxian, the head of Huaguan Pictures. Huaguan Pictures was one of the first mainland film companies to enter Hong Kong after the new film policy was introduced in Hong Kong. At that time, Cui Xingxian was ambitious, and together with Star Art Entertainment, they set up a project to shoot Painted Skin in the shortest time possible, intending to cut the biggest piece of this extremely tempting cake. Painted Skin invested more than 100 million, and Cui Xingxian's goal was to win 1 billion in the global box office, which was the first shot of Huaguan Pictures south to Hong Kong. But the first step of his ambitious plan was hit hard. On the surface, the box office of Painted Skin was already quite good, and it once broke the weekly box office record of Hong Kong co-produced, films in Hong Kong. But outsiders might not know, but Cui Xingxian himself knew very well that behind the box office of Painted Skin, there was a huge investment in advertising and a lot of marketing expenses. Calculating the cost, Hong Kong's box office share was not enough to make up for the investment in advertising and marketing, not to mention the cost of shooting and production. It was a total loss. Huaguan Pictures was a big company, and they could afford to lose tens of millions of yuan. However, their partner, Star Art Entertainment, couldn't take it. The two parties had serious disagreements on the follow-up publicity of the movie, and they almost broke up. Cui Xingxian recalled how mean and stingy the general manager of Star Art Entertainment had been during their last meeting. He was so angry that he wanted to smash the ashtray on the table into the general manager's face. It was a fatal blow. When Cui Xingxian first came to Xiangjiang, he met a master at a gathering of his friends. The master told him that recently, there was an evil spirit in his life, and if he offended it, he would definitely hide it. At that time, Cui Xingxian dismissed it with a laugh. Only now did he realize that this master was truly capable. His Sha was undoubtedly Lu Chen. When he thought of Lu Chen again, Cui Xingxian gnashed his teeth in hatred. This brat who had suddenly popped out of nowhere had not only snatched away the beautiful woman he had once pursued, but had also become a stumbling block in the development of Huaguan Pictures. He had caused him to suffer a huge setback. However, Cui Xingxian could not do anything to Lu Chen. Lu Chen had the support of the Li family, and Cui Xingxian could not afford to offend him. His plot failed, and he fought head-on, and the result was that he was utterly defeated. Lu Chen was simply his nemesis. Sitting in the office, Cui Xingxian became more and more annoyed the more he thought about it. He could not help but pull off his tie to let his breathing become smoother. Then, he habitually held the mouse and opened the Hong Kong news website. As soon as he opened the website, a news pop-up window instantly popped up. A Chinese ghost stories box office broke 500 million, and stars gathered at Shangri-La Hotel to celebrate. F***CK. Cui Xingxian finally lost control of his emotions. He grabbed the mouse and smashed it against the wall. Bang! Accompanied by a crisp sound, the expensive Bluetooth mouse broke into pieces on the spot and died. The secretary sitting in the outer room across the wall was shocked. She secretly turned her head to look at the closed office door, and her heart was extremely conflicted. Should she go in and ask? Recently, the boss's temper was getting worse, and she was worried that she would become a tool to vent his anger. Cui Xingxian, who had smashed the mouse, finally calmed down a little. He pressed the internal contact button on the phone and asked the secretary to find him a new mouse. He gritted his teeth and secretly swore. Lu Chen, I'll let you be happy this time, we'll see. Unlike in Hong Kong, Huaguan Pictures' home ground was still in China, and the painted skin had not lost yet. Cui Xingxian's resentment was so strong that even Lu Chen, who was in the banquet hall of Shangri-La Hotel, felt a chill. What's wrong? Qin Fei, who was beside Lu Chen, saw him shiver and asked with concern, did you catch a cold? Lu Chen rubbed his nose and smiled, no, I suddenly felt a little cold. Still cold? Qin Fei looked around and said with a smile, it's already lively enough tonight. A Chinese ghost story had been released for 7 days, and the box office had exceeded 50 million yuan. It was a matter of course to hold a celebration party. This time, under the strong request of Jiayang Pictures, it was especially grand. In Hong Kong, it was a tradition to hold a celebration party for a movie's success. It was also a kind of publicity, or more accurately, a means of showing off. Therefore, the organizers had to invite all kinds of media and guests from all walks of life to come. In this world, there were very few people who would offer timely help, but there were countless people who would add flowers to the brocade. Lu Chen's studio and Jiayang Pictures sent out invitations. Those who received the invitation, unless they really could not come, would attend in person or send someone to attend. Lu Chen's friends in the Xiangjiang entertainment circle all came to support. Lu Gangxing could not attend because he was performing in the mainland, but he specially called to congratulate Lu Chen. Therefore, there were many guests in the large banquet hall of Shangri-La Hotel, and well-dressed gentlemen and ladies gathered in groups, making it a real place for fame and fortune. And as the protagonists of this celebration banquet, Lu Chen and Qin Fei undoubtedly got too much attention. The two were the focus of attention wherever they were. There were countless people who came over to chat with each other whether they knew each other or not. Lu Chen actually did not like this kind of social interaction very much, but if Lu Chen's studio wanted to develop and grow in Hong Kong, it was very necessary to expand the network of people in the circle. This was probably the so-called, in the pugilistic world, people can't help themselves. Of course, many people would envy this kind of can't help themselves, which they pursued but could not get. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.